I'm very pleased to introduce the next speaker, Rosemary Lokhorst. She's the co-founder and CEO of the award-winning mixed reality company, Badass Studio, which creates real-time extended reality experiences for live events, such as the E1 World Championship and Mighty Minis, which are like, she will show you, races. Rosemary has a few decades of experience in both F500 companies and startups. She's a great producer, and she's the winning writer of Flat Malta, an Academy Award Nichols Fellowship Finnish semi-finalist. And she's also an investor in startups such as Quantum Story and Integrated Reality Lab. And let me start our talk. She will talk about building participatory sports for the future.
Hello, everyone. It's going to be interesting, double 50 minutes. I'm going to do 110 minutes in 50. Since I'm in sports, I will tell you what's at stake. I'm Swiss, so the best 2 questions that are judged by Professor Mate will get a chocolate bar each. Has to be competition, right? I will start with talking a little bit about who I am, so you know why I'm here, why I deserve to be here, hopefully. As Natalie's already said, I work in extended realities. So we make real-time digital twins of live events, racing, but also other events. And as such, of course, I've had the pleasure of working on an insane amount of really interesting projects. I started out as help desk. So we've talked about this before. One of my first jobs was actually trying to explain to people how to test things, user testing. Then I went into development, from development into consulting, from consulting into project management, then into sales, and then into management. Mostly at Fortune 500 companies, but I also kind of dabbled on the side with startups. And one of my startups then asked me to join them. And they were building SimCity in real life, which I thought was kind of interesting. So I did jump ship and I joined a company called Living Planet. And they used, at the time, virtual reality, but also gaming mechanisms to rebuild entire cities. So imagine like if you have a new city in China that needs to be built, there's urban planning involved in that. We would put that in. We would have millions of fake people, if you will, with real characteristics of people that live in those types of cities, move in. And then we were able to feed back to the developers saying, you're going to have a traffic problem here in 5 years. You're going to have an energy problem in 10 years. And I'm telling this because that showed me kind of the potential that gaming and game mechanics have to really make a difference in the world. It was kind of hard after that one to go back to just selling Outlook. So instead of that, I then joined another startup, and we created a first mental health game that existed. We did that for teens and young adults that had chronic illnesses, and then COVID hit, and suddenly everybody had an issue, so that exploded. And it became a little bit too big for the private family that was funding it, and so I handed that over. And instead of then going back into work, I decided, well, I'm going to just take a break. So I took a little sabbatical. That's where the script writing came in. I wanted to do something completely different. And as I was doing that, people started asking me to help on serious games. So I worked on a diabetes game. I worked on an oil rig game. I worked on a simulation for a beverage company that was helping local people in Africa and South America building their shops. I worked on a disaster game, a disaster relief game for Save the Children, where we implemented some of the stuff that the dean was talking about with really empathy and figuring out how you can first respond as a private person to kind of natural and other catastrophes. So a bunch of those, won't bore you too much with it, but that then brought me to Badass Studios as an external consultant first. But then when I saw what they were doing, I decided, you know what, I'm going to jump in on this because I see that there's other people doing it. Don't worry, this is the most words that you will see in my presentation. So talking about immersive experiences for a bit, there's a lot of them, right? I mean, this is just a tiny bit, whatever I could type in quickly. Actually, most of those I've seen in person, so that's basically why I wrote them in there. But there's many more out there. There's different types of experiences as well. Some are more immersive, some are more interactive. Now there are terms that are starting to form around what the type of immersion is. I think in one way that's good. On the other hand, also, if we're talking about what the dean said about interdisciplinary, then some of that will go out of the window. And you'll see what I mean by that when you see some of the stuff that we've been working on. Does anybody recognize any of these? Seen any of these? Excellent. I can recommend to go to every single one of them. Right, so when we started as Badass, or when I was joining, they were working with Red Bull on an esports title. Basically what they did is they took Rocket League, which is obviously cars playing football, the real football, the one you play with your foot. And they were projecting those cars, but not on a screen because that might be kind of boring to just see it next to each other, see two people just playing a game, right? Even if you're in a very public space. So what they did is they created in virtual reality a Wembley Stadium. They created the event space. And then instead of going into the bathroom, you would end up in Wembley Stadium and all of the cars from Rocket League would be actually driving around on the field. And then you could go find your seats, pay for your seats. If your team started winning, you could upgrade. You could walk, you could drive along the field as well. So if you see the guy up there is actually sitting in a car, driving amongst the Rocket League cars. You could also sit in one of those cars. That was a big mistake. Wouldn't recommend that. It's not fun to drive as a passenger in a Rocket League car. You can imagine. But you know, it was a lot of fun. And basically what I said to the guys is, you know what, if we want to do this, never mind the event production, getting the people there, other people can do this. Let's do just the technology. And while we're at it, if we can do this for an esports title, why not for real sports? And so basically they then said, well, how do we do that? And I then said, well, let's figure out first what's needed, why it could be needed, what the issues might be, and then look at who might benefit from them. So classic thing, when you're building a company, you have to really look at what product are you developing, but also why are you developing it, right? A lot of times I feel in the games industry, we build stuff that's cool, and then we try to see, can we sell it? So I basically told them, let's take a step back. Let's figure out what we do, how we do that, and then go test it with a customer. I'm not going to go through each of these, but basically what we identified, especially in sports, is that younger people don't really participate in sports watching as much as the rights holders would ask. Or even worse, they go and they walk out, which is not really a good feeling for the people who are actually performing the sport. And so we wanted to make sure that we really jump in on that and figure out how can we make the sport participatory. So you're not just watching, but you're actively in it. And so that's what we did. We take live events, we make a real-time digital twin. So we build the environments, mostly in Unreal Engine. Then we build whatever assets are needed, like branding, sponsorships, cars, boats, whatever the series is. And in real time, let's say a race, While the race is happening, we then map the real-time data from the real boats onto the unreal boats. Now they go in parallel, completely in sync. And that then means you can pretty much use it for anything you want. And so also what you can do is you can turn it into a broadcast. So just imagine there's a boat race, it's offshore, not always very nicely visible. And on top of that, even if it is visible, very far away. So sometimes you can't really see who's driving, especially in the first season, 3 of the boats had like a black layout. You couldn't see the difference between the boats at all. We decided to partner with this particular series as our first customer because they were in a similar situation that we are. At the time we started with them, they were a startup. They had no money. They had an idea. They knew what they wanted to do. They knew how they wanted to grow. And they had a couple of really interesting people involved. The people that set this up had been in NASA, Formula One, and other disciplinaries. But also, what they had managed to do is they had managed to get teams together that really worked. So imagine you have a boat race, it's electrical boats, so they want to create awareness for greener oceans, and which is also part of why we do this, because they don't want floaties with sponsors in the water in plastic. They want to do a different way of advertisement. And then they got team owners involved with it. So the way the race works is it's like more like a tennis match where you race off against each other over several days. It's 50% female and male pilots. They have to switch out. That's part of the strategy, but they all get the same boats. So the advantage is really the driving and the strategy. On top of that, their team owners cheer them on. And team owners, you'll know most of them. So for example, LeBron James, Tom Brady, Rafa Nadal, Mark Anthony, Will Smith, all of the team. Prince Albert is the most recent addition to it. So that's all to create awareness. So for us, it was a chance as a small company to get exposure, right, quickly. And also to test out stuff because they were a startup. So they were not going to say no if stuff wasn't completely working. So we basically, for the first season they did, for 5 races, we stalked them. Every time we just showed up to the race and we said, look, here's what we built. All we need is your data. And they're like, okay, fine. So then on the second race, they gave us the data and we're like, look, here's what we built. This is what you can do now. So all of the stuff here, basically, we started one season in stalking them and then building it for them. And then in the second season, they gave us a 3-year contract for everything. And by everything, I mean virtual reality broadcasts. So digital twin, you can see in the background, that's actually Google Maps. I think the resolution is not fantastic here, but the back row is Google Maps, and then the front row and whatever we need to manipulate, we replace with Unreal Engine. Water, for example, right? If we want the boats to go through, you want water splashes. So we take out the water and we replace it with our own water system. We have the branding in there, the teams, and then as you can see above, there's the nameplates. That's the real-time tracking that comes in, where we see where the boats are. So there's GPS and other stuff on the boats where we get the tracking information. This is used in the broadcasts just like a normal camera. So we have different angles that we can place because it's 360. We can place a camera anywhere in this world. And then the director just basically shouts, camera 5, camera 10, camera badass 2. And that's how we participate in the broadcast. We also made the boats bigger so they're easier to see. So you can start to manipulate stuff. And as you can see, it would be really hard to do a 12-story billboard just for one weekend. So those are all the things where we just created more visibility for their sponsors. When you then need augmented reality overlays, so this is where we get into mixed reality a bit more, you just delete the environment. But because we have everything in place, the tracking is still there. So all of the stuff around the boats and over the boats, all the information, everything is still there and it's in the right spot. And we do this with one single camera, quite high up. Apart from that, we then take, actually, let me first show you a little bit of what that looks like in real life. So this is one of the races we did last year. This was the championship final in Miami. You can see that they use this as a course explainer at the beginning to explain how the race works and how they do this. And then they also use it for virtual broadcasts from top-down views, slowing down things. In this case, as you can see, the boats are going around and are just lots bigger. Still not as big as the cruise ships in Miami, as we've seen. And then you get to also help cover up things. So here we deleted the environment. Those are the boats going then. And when you see Miami, they actually had a huge building in Miami. And we arrived 5 days before the event, and they started demolishing the building. I'm just telling my guys, like, okay, guys, live update, you have to demolish the building, and more, and more, and more, and more. So every day it was a little bit less. So we replaced it in Unreal Engine, and it looks really nice. But what do you do in the real world, right? So we just quickly covered it up. But those are the kind of things where I think virtual worlds and real worlds can really go. And the good part about how we build it is we can change stuff on the fly. In the case of Miami, about 15 minutes before the race started, for safety reasons, they decided to change the track, which then means we had to adapt the track in our virtual environment as well. And not only that, you'll see here, the other thing we do with it is gaming, which means that for the, oops, how do I get to the next one? There we go. We also do this in live games because we have a twin. So why not let you race in it? So we get the data from the boats as well and map that onto your simulator. So you can race like a time trial or like a race off, several laps, just one lap, just a general game basically. But that means that we also have to update the track and sponsors if necessary in there. And that's also done during the weekend if necessary. What that means with E1 is we put that on a simulator on site, which is kind of cool because then we have people like the team owners come and sit down. I think the first guy that tested our system was in Saudi Arabia, was Steve Aoki, and one of the crown princes of Saudi Arabia. We were just finished, we just installed it. And Alex and I were like, okay, let's have a coffee and then come back and test. And just that minute we turn around and there's like 50 cameras. Steve Aoki's like, can we play? And we're like, yeah, maybe. But it worked out, fortunately. So yeah, everybody comes and sits down. And for me, the most fun part is the pilots come and sit down. So as soon as I land, generally the pilots are like, Rosie, when are the sims up? I want to try the track. I want to practice. What can I do? And over the years, of course, we've gotten much more accurate with how the boat works. We now have actual CAD filings in there. So we have actual boat physics. And it feels quite realistic, even though it's a cheap rig. What that looks like is this. If the play button will let me. There we go. So again, this is from Miami. This was a live GP that we did. I believe this is the session that Will Smith's manager did. You can see that they're playing, but also you can see that the cockpit and the boosts, they have an electrical boost in the boat because of course it's live. And then if you switch to live GP, you pick your own boat, you pick your own team. And now you can start seeing we have a third person view, and we have a first person view. And just as he goes around the corner, you'll start seeing that there's other boats on the water, like here. So those are the actual boats on the water. You can see Team Brady is in there twice. That's because our guy Ben is playing as Brady in that same race. And those boats that you see, like the one from Will Smith there, Westbrook, that is a ghost boat in our game, but that boat is in that actual position on the water. So now you can race live and try to win from your favorite pilot. So imagine if this is in Formula One and you can try to win against Lando Norris, as an example. The other thing that we did in Miami was we then took that information from the simulator and we actually put it into the broadcasts. So not only were there ghosts in the game from the real pilots, the pilot that was winning on the sim was projected into the actual real race as well. So now you're really starting to mix. And the discussions that we have with E1 now as we start publicly launching the game is building a bit of an esports theme around it, where people at home on Steam can then play the game, and whoever is the best in the league then gets projected into the broadcast. And by into the broadcast, I mean on Sky TV, DAZN, really where they do it. They stream it on YouTube as well. So it gets to, I think every race gets seen by about 1 to 2 million people at the moment. We're also talking to Formula E. That's 400 million people that watch it. So then you get a real reach with your game. The other thing we've started, which is kind of a demo, and now we're launching within 4 months, apparently, is putting these boats into Fortnite. Again, there's some limitations sometimes, but bear with me, this is a demo, but I'll just show you this. We put this together in maybe about 3 days, 4 days, because we have all the assets, we have the digital twin, so now it's just putting it into a different kind of environment, right? And if you can start to see the potential, we're actually not competing with other racing games anymore. What we're doing is we're complementing them. We're saying we can integrate into your game. All you need is the live part of it. At the moment, this is not live in Fortnite yet. We're working with them on making that happen because Fortnite doesn't allow live yet. Most of the concerts and stuff that you've seen is pre-recorded with motion capture and then it's a video. But those are one of the things that we're working on with them to be able to follow around the championship. And we're going to be building all of the championship locations into Fortnite as well. That then means spectacular locations like next one is Como, Lake Como. The one after that is Dubrovnik, then Monaco, Lagos in Nigeria, Angola is a new one, and then Miami and Bahamas for this year. When you then have that twin and you have the assets, you have the CAD files of the boat or the cars in this case, because we've also worked on other series, you can then start doing fan activations with them. So one of the things we did with a team called Cairo is we took their car apart. We hid all the separate parts around the location, and then people had to go scan them, put them together. And if they put them together correctly, they would get pit access. So you can start playing with real world benefits and really make sure that it brings a benefit to the rights holder for what you're doing, gamifying, basically getting their audiences up. Some of the things that fit into that is these two here, where on the left-hand side, again, with live data, you have an AR pop-up. Again, same tracks, same digital twin, but now you can see that the boats that are coming are in the same position, and you can see that the Westbrook is actually crossing the finish line first. This was a particularly funny one for me because we were standing there and Team Brady was there and they couldn't find their boat. Because like I said, in the first race, they hadn't really thought about colors of the boat to be really visible. So I handed them the iPad and said, here. And they were able to follow around and see who was overtaking the boat, and you can put all the information about how fast they're going. On the right-hand side here, similar thought, but imagine you're sitting at the event. You can hear now that it's a little bit louder, and you don't know what the boats are. So you can just hold up your phone, then you can see the speed of the boat, team information, who's driving, what position they're in, whatever information basically we want to display, but just by holding up and pointing at the boat. And as he comes around this curve, then you can see that there's also a drone following. So this goes back into broadcasting. You can then click on the boat, and now you get the broadcast view of the drone. So it's much more interactive when you're actually at the race. So we did this for E1. Then we went to other racing series. We did it for Extreme H, which is hydrogen-powered cars in the desert. We worked with motocross, for example, which is also very interesting, doing a human on a motorcycle and making that look realistic in 5 weeks' time. The speed at which we build is also something that is very different. We hired a 3D artist last year that worked for a AAA company. And when we told him he was going to be building 16 different games and environments in 1 year, I was like, no. No, but it has to look good. It has to, like, yep, it does have to do all of that. But yeah, we did 19 events last year. And for this year, projected to do around about 35 events. Most of those, then we have people on site. So it makes it fun for the people that work for us. We rotate. So we send everybody out to an event. Our esports manager recently went out to Jeddah, which was a very new experience for him, to be somewhere in the African desert, somewhere in the middle of nowhere. It was amazing. But this is, of course, not the end game to just do racing. So we recently started going into human team sports as well. We're doing pilots, for example, with MMA fighting. Now, that's, of course, very hard to do live, right? How do you fight against somebody live? I mean, how are you going to punch them, for example? We call that kind of stuff chaos physics. So while that is not possible yet, what you can do is when you're at the site, you use these AR pop-ups for more information, really being able to, for example, place a bet on things or simulate if these two fighters had done XYZ action, what would have then happened and would the outcome have been different? Or for the next fight, what do we think the outcome will be considering the characteristics of these kinds of fighters? We also did a little bit of a fun thing where you could do a cage walk in virtual reality. You could just walk through basically the stadium and then you could interact with the sponsors, walk in and do the classic, I'm the biggest person, do a glove check with the referee, and then the fight would start and you would take your seat. Similarly, what we haven't done yet, but what we do want to do and what our vision is, we want to go towards concerts. There's a lot of concerts in the metaverse at the moment, right? We've seen Metallica, Daft Punk, Snoop Dogg is super active. There's crossovers with movies like Wicked Experience, for example. But a lot of those, most of those, are not entirely live. If you look at the ABBA Voyage, for example, that's a video that's just played every single evening and was captured once in motion capture. They make it live by having some band members there and play live music, and it's a fun evening, but it's not a live experience. And also, it's not going to be affordable for a lot of people because that one costs almost $100 million to build because they also had to build a stadium for it. So what we're trying to do is really look at how can we do this much lower cost, much faster, and give them different experiences that you can still participate in. So similar to where we started with Red Bull, where you went to the toilet and then ended up in Wembley Stadium, imagine you can walk into a concert venue where a real concert is happening in the real world. You take your seat that you bought, you pay for that. And then obviously if the idiot starts singing behind you, like our co-founder Ben is terrible at karaoke, so you'd want to move away from that, then you can upgrade. Or in the case of a football game, you can actually have Ted Lasso seats, or you can walk among the field. Or in my case, because I'm Dutch, Swiss and Dutch, the Dutch team always lose in penalties. So I could go onto the grass and I could stand next to it and go, come on. And if you can't do it, then I can say, well, you know what? I can do this better. And why not? We know where the ball was. We know where the goalkeeper is. Have a go. So it just makes things interactive. You can go on stage with your favorite musician, try to follow the choreography on stage. So there's different things that you could do and different ways of also integrating the sponsors. So again, everything that you do has to come back to also making sure that you do something that has a benefit to whatever the rights holder wants to do. And still make it fun for us, of course, to build stuff. Oops. Don't worry, you don't have to read all of this. But I was asked to talk a little bit about what does it take to do this? What does it take to build something like this? Well, it takes failing a few times. The company that I mentioned before with the building SimCity in real life, I walked away from that and all I owned was a car, a dog, and a handbag and a phone. And that was pretty much it. So sometimes you have to fail to really succeed. And my biggest learning is you want to try and fail as fast as possible so that it's the least damage on yourself and on the company. So one of the things that we did very early on was, as I said, we stalked the racing series. We wanted to see what it is live. Does it work? Can we get the data? Would they even want it? So basically all of the things that we have here in the plan of when do we go to the customer, when do we sell something? Do we first build a platform and then go on? We threw all of that out of the window. And instead we said, okay, for this first season, let's focus on one client only, to take all of these steps, verify it with that client, and then we roll things out. So basically you were building the plane while we were flying it, right? Meaning we have a platform that we're building. The idea, of course, is to take the platform that we have with the data ingestion, all the SDKs, all the APIs, etc., and then make that standard for any kind of series. And then everything we do on top just becomes modules. So think of it like as a Microsoft, right? Where you have Windows and then on top you've got Office and other applications, or even the iPhone, iOS, and then apps on top of it. Doing that means that you have to have a lot of money to make the platform scalable. Well, when I started, we were 3 people. We're now officially 10, but 6 that are helping us out, and then we're onboarding throughout this year. We hope to double by the end of the year. So we're growing fast, but that also means that there's a lot of investment necessary for the platform. So what we did is, instead of first building, then figuring out the marketing plan, then et cetera, we actually went to the customer and said, here's what we think we want to build. Here's what we want to do. We want to offer you the licensing model as if we'd already built it. So you don't pay for any of the development costs. You just pay the license fees. And as we go over the next 3 years, we're going to build everything we promised you. And so that's what we did. So we did take this into account of having a proper go-to-market plan, but we just looked at a customer to help us finance it, because we're all still bootstrapped and we're holding out as long as we can, because of course early investment also means a large impact on your company, on shares, etc. It's a trade-off, right? But for us it worked, because also all of the money just went into AI and nothing else. And so therefore it was a lot easier to just build it ourselves, basically. In the meantime, we have started to put a lot of AI into our workflows. I'm sure it's a topic that everybody is interested in right now, of what that does for gaming. What we do with it is, in the platform, all of the data sanitization, testing, predictive analytics. Again, real world example, we were in Nigeria, in Lagos. We had a race there, everything was going spectacular. It was actually quite pretty as well, the race, because the water there is brown, and so the colors stand out quite nicely. It's really beautiful. And suddenly we had no data for about 120 seconds. So that means that they then switched to our virtual world, and while we tried to find out what was going on. And turns out that the Nigerian president was there, and he had a GPS blocker. So we're using AI to fill those gaps, to figure out where the boats are, where they're going, and really make those predictions. We also use AI to generate some of these environments, because obviously, we build things very fast, and anything that's in the background, it doesn't really matter if it's very, very, very good, and if it's executed to the best of our abilities. And then we just replace the front row of the buildings, or iconic buildings, with Unreal Engine versions that we build ourselves. There's a bunch more, and I'm happy to answer any questions that we use AI for, but those are the main 2 points. So with that, I'll leave you with a little bit of a visual of all of the stuff that I talked to you about. This was in Doha. This was one of our first races. That's the Red Bull experience I talked about. This was for a Blast. Extreme H. That's what I was talking about, where everybody got a little bit queasy. Fun story about Lagos, actually. Simba is in there somewhere. That's the fun part about doing games. You can put stuff in there that doesn't exist in the real world. Natalie, do you want to control the sound, and then we can ask questions? Personally, one of the most fun things this year has been for me to have some of the weirdest people come and play our simulators at all of these events. So we've had Tim Peake, who's basically the Neil Armstrong of the UK, play our simulator. We've had, influencers. We've had grandmas. We had the Crown Prince of Qatar take his son on his lap and play, which unfortunately I was told to delete Cloud 2. So, but yeah, that's been really a wild ride, and something I never would have expected when I went into gaming, that's the kind of environments I would end up with. But I think ending up with interdisciplinary and looking at how you can utilize mixed reality and reality worlds in different environments really gives you that opportunity to do things that you don't even know yet could be happening. Right, let's get down to the real business. Who has a question?
Yeah, thank you. We will use the mics. Yeah.
Thank you for this very interesting presentation. I was actually wondering, sorry for the echo, if it would change anything in applying this technology on collective sports instead of racing in any ways, meaning in terms of technology, in terms of supporter engagement with the sport, in terms of attractivity. I know that, for example, you mentioned football or soccer or whatever, but the UEFA in Europe, the European Federation, they are like very skeptical and want to keep technology up of the pitch, especially for the ref, because the mythology of the mistakes and how mistakes can shape the culture and identity of a proper club. So would it concretely change something in the scale from technology to the proper anthropology of the interaction?
It's a very broad question. Let me start with what I'd like to change. So we're toying with things with the E1 series where, for example, they have a boost, right? The boost is electronically controlled and they can use that boost, I believe, 2 times during the race. What if you at home can vote of who gets an extra boost? Or what if when you're playing and you're winning, your boost affects the actual boats on the water and vice versa? So you can really, truly make it interactive. Formula E is experimenting with some of that. They have an area where they have an active boost, where if it's augmented reality, but if the driver happens to drive over it, they get an extra boost, for example. So those kind of things I think would be really interesting to make things more interactive also for the viewers and have an impact. On the broader impact on the sports, football is, I used to work for FIFA way back. And I was in the legal department, the most boring department in FIFA ever, but I did learn a lot. And a lot of those things, also Formula One, for example, they have very stringent rights, as you say, of what can be done, what cannot be done, not just with the technology, but also with viewing, how it can be viewed, because of course they want to monetize everything that they can, right? And they also want to make sure that they minimize risk and mistakes. I think we're getting to a place where that is slowly changing. They're starting to use technologies, for example, where on the broadcast, you just take skeletal points. So you don't have to do motion capture anymore. From the skeletal points, you can then gather the data. For example, if somebody's starting to limp, you can start to figure out, oh, he's going to pull a hamstring within the next 20 minutes. Let's pull him out. And so there's already stuff where technology is changing. And I think, especially in learning, simulation, current simulators for Formula One, as an example, cost 2.8 million pounds, right? For the one that McLaren is, or if you've seen the F1 movie, that's 2.8 million just for the simulator, not even talking about the software. And then you have to use the wind tunnel to do that, et cetera, et cetera. So if we can give these pilots, these boats, for example, the pilots don't have a boat at home where they can practice. They don't have a track where they can practice. If we can bridge that gap, I think some of the impact we can have is make the sport more accessible, having more people come from esports into the real sports. We're just this summer, we're putting an esports person into the E1 boat as well, for example. And I think those kinds of things is where we can have an impact for now.
Thank you. You have a question here?
And then in the front here too.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing. you make everything sounds very easy. So my question is,
Not a problem at all.
exactly. So my question is exactly in that context. Is there a challenge that you didn't expect and you would like to share, and obviously how you overcome it?
How long are you here? Well, one of the funniest one was I was in Dubrovnik, and on some of those I go myself, depending on if we're testing out something new, and some of them I send my team. But in Dubrovnik, it was me on site. It was probably around 113 degrees. So we were standing out with the simulators out in the sun in the VIP club so that people could see it. And I'm standing there with an iPad in my hand, of course, right? Which gives a whole lot of problems, starting from having t-shirts that are super quality, meaning very thick, horrible, to then having the iPads with no iPad holder, another challenge that we didn't think. But then the funniest one was at some point I started saying I have to power down the PCs every like half hour for like 10 minutes. And then people can play again because it was just everything was overheating. Obviously, we had fans, we had cooling, etc. But everything was overheating. So one of my team decided to be very friendly and try to help me out. And so he looked at the broadcast and he sent me a screenshot of where there was a tree and space for the simulators so I could move them. Super helpful. And then I went over there and I took a picture and I sent it back to him. I was like, I am not moving my simulators there because there's a big pile of dog poo over there. I was like, I'm not moving this. So it's the weirdest stuff, you know, from getting 8 minutes notice for the minister of Croatia to come play, for example, and not knowing, you know, if we have internet access. A lot of the challenges we have technologically, really difficult ones, it has to do with internet connectivity, data, egress costs, you know, making sure that the game is optimized and that you can do it live and that you don't send everything back and forth. So having that cloud architecture is really important. We just got accepted into the AI accelerator with Dell. That's starting in March. And part of what we're going to be doing with them is really making sure to look at, we call it creating a badass Dell appliance, looking at how can we do edge computing and cloud computing together to really optimize how we run these events worldwide. Because now they're smaller events, but imagine if, you know, again, if you have the World Cup, for example, right, then there's a lot more people that will be playing at the same time. So that's our biggest challenge, I think, just to figure that architecture out. There was one here, Natalie.
Sorry. I'll go quickly. But there's two, but I don't need the chocolate. One, gaming and gambling in sports is obviously a big revenue source. Are you engaging with that? And number two, when you have a virtual contestant on the same track as the actual boats, let's say, how do you manage the physics of competition? Right? You don't want them to beat everyone and make it look too easy. Or like, how do you make it fair?
Okay. Well, the first one's easy. We're contemplating that, but it depends on the rights holder, right? If they want to allow that or not. For us, it's a data point integration. So first, it would be really easy. What we would do is we go to one of the bigger betting agencies and say, here's our data. Let's match this up. So that's pretty easy. The other one of how to make it really, really stick and really make sure that it's fair. We first started out with an with an arcade type version. So it looked a bit more gamey, if you will. You can see the live GP looked a lot more realistic, right? And the E1 series wanted it like that as well because they wanted to show off that they were doing something new and innovative that nobody's ever done. So they didn't want it to be realistic at the beginning. However, everybody that was sitting in the boat was like, it just felt so slow. They go 70 kilometers, so 55 knots an hour. So they're not super fast. It just feels fast because of the water, the bumps, etc. And then they're hydrofoils. So if you go a little bit to the left and your foil hits in, then you can do a 90-degree within like half a second, which is what unfortunately happened in Como, in Lago Maggiore this year. But the point of that being, we just worked with their pilots for a year and a half. Every time they sat on the simulators, we started coming like a week early, exactly when the pilots arrived, and look at how does this work? How does the physics work? How does trim work, like getting the engine deeper in the water? How does lift work when they go out? How do they handle the boat? And it's pretty equal now. There's still stuff we can do. We're implementing a couple of more things now that we have the physical cat files as well. So there's a couple of things on the engine side that we're still implementing. But in the case for Extreme H, for example, the guys from the suspension from the car actually made us take out the logo and take out some of the realism because they didn't want to be able to have other people re-engineer what they were doing. So it's pretty realistic. We use CAT files, we use all the production files that they have, and then we work with the engineers, with the boat engineers and with the pilots.
It sounds like you all do games, simulations, and broadcasts. And for each of those, you maybe have like a remote user or a local user at the event. How did you decide which users to focus on?
That was dictated by the customer. They wanted to focus first on the on-site people. They weren't going out for ticketing yet. They were they're letting people watch the races for free for the first 2 seasons, just so that they could get public to come. And as such, they weren't able to manage and control the public, right? They had a fan engagement zone there where we had simulators as well. But they were focused really on getting people to the races and making the races themselves really as interactive as possible. For us, that was great because it meant that we had a controlled environment to test stuff out. Well, I say controlled environment, but considering the dog poo and the GPS trackers, and you can imagine it's not always as controlled as you would want it to be. Like Dubrovnik is one big rock with stairs. Try to get satellite connection there. Exactly the wrong location. So there's stuff that you find out over there, but the point was really to get the local users first. This year, we're going to focus on the remote users. So we're starting to build up a beta audience. And as I said, then we're releasing Fortnite in Monaco as a first beta. And then we're releasing the Steam game in Miami, which is in November, in time for then the season ends in the Bahamas. And some racing, by the way, just wanted local only, like Extreme H. Nobody's really going to fly around to see something in the desert, right? So then they want remote only.
Hi, my name is Nathan. Kind of in the similar vein as her question, like who's the main demographic? You mentioned like reaching out to Fortnite, and I imagine it's probably people who like sports. So are there any other demographics that surprised you that were using your application?
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite ones was an 11-year-old girl who won the tickets, the VIP tickets, and a meet and greet with all of the team owners in Monaco, who came with her mother, was a tourist, came to the fan zone, tried this out, started driving like 3-4 days in a row. And she's like, I really, really love this. And she actually beat out everybody else and won the prize. So I think at the moment, what we're looking at is an audience of 13 plus. But the idea is, of course, to also catch younger audiences by integration into Fortnite, Roblox, etc. The idea for the rights holders is that they catch people younger and get an attachment to the drivers, the pilots, the players, so that they then will want to follow the sport, right? That's the idea. And making it more interactive gives you more emotional connection with it. And it will make it much more interesting if you can say, well, I'm trying to beat Lando Norris, right? That's much more interesting as I went to a race and I sat somewhere way in the back and couldn't see anything.
Hi, I'm Christian. I just wanted to know about your founders, who is funding the company, and your comment about the fact that the gaming industry is in a kind of difficult situation from a business overall standpoint.
Yeah, sure. So if you've seen our name, Badass, Ben Adam Douglas and Alex Sanguin Skillen. Those are the 2 guys that I met and that asked me to consult for them. I'm really not making this up. So Alex likes to say that he's the ass of the organization. I don't know what his parents were thinking. But I joined them, I think they were about 1.5 years in, but they were running events and then doing some tech on the side, basically. And so when I joined them 3 years ago, we then refocus really on the technology only. So it's the three of us that are the founders. We each have our skills. I'm the one that likes to build businesses and partnerships and do all kinds of front-facing stuff, but I also manage a team. Alex is the one that is the creative mind. He comes up with all this stuff. He likes to give me a lot of good headaches of how we can solve this. And my job is then to make sure that he can do what he wants to do. And Ben's the one that finds us all the boring stuff, like money, HR, although we say HR is the last role that we ever hire, right after legal, because that stops the company a lot. So we really want to make sure that we build first. We're a developer and really front-facing first before we do anything else. Does that answer your question? And then the gaming industry, I mean, we've hired quite a few people from the gaming industry that were laid off, right? For us, it's great. It's not always an ideal fit because a lot of the gamers want to build their own game and stick with that game, and they like one game and want to be with that forever, right? So that doesn't always work. We've had a few people then leave because of that as well. But the skills are basically what we need, right? Currently, we're really desperately looking for Unreal Engine developers. And very soon we'll be looking for AI engineers. And we're also looking to hire another maybe one or two 3D artists, for example, as well. Yeah, graphic artists as well. Although most of what we do is in 3D.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much.